We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution with the United States of America.
Hey! Welcome! That's really loud. How you doing, guys? Welcome to A Push Review with HipHughes. Tom Richey's on his way. He had to rebuild his computer in his basement. So he's doing that right now. He's like putting it together. And then soon enough, he's going to be joining us on the Hangout on YouTube Live. And what we're going to do for you guys is in a minute, we're going to figure this out. And we're going to take Q&A. We'll have some people on the tweeters right there. You subscribe to HipHughes, Tom Richey. We'll be reading questions off the Twitter. And we're basically going to hopscotch our way through the course. See, and I hear a Richey. I see a Richey face, and I think he's coming on momentarily. But basically what we'll do is we're waiting for Mr. Richey to pop in, is we will be covering kind of concept first, like big themes. I'll especially be trying to help you guys with like tricky ways to remember concepts, coming together with big ideas. And then we're going to throw it to Mr. Richey for more specificity on the exam, looking at multiple choice questions that pop up. He's playing the video in the background right now. Nice. Hey! Welcome! Now I can hear myself screaming. How you doing, guys? Welcome to Push Review with HipHughes. All right, so we're going to get started momentarily. Here we go, guys. He's doing that right now. He's like putting it together. And then soon enough, he's going to be joining us on the Hangout on YouTube Live. There we go. We're working on it. For you guys is in a minute, we're going to figure this out, and we're going to take Q&A. People on the tweeters right there. You subscribe to HipHughes, Tom Richey. We'll be reading questions. All right, so I'm just going to get started so we're not wasting anybody's time here. Mr. Richey's figuring it out. He's playing the video in the background. So what I would like to do for you guys is one kind of resource that you can check out is go to HipHughes.blogspot.com, and when you get there, I'll show you in a second here. I'm going to turn my screen share on, so I'll be able to show you exactly what I'll be looking at as I take you through this short review. There we go. All right, so you guys should be, there's your screen right there. So you can Google, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I just kind of Googled myself, Googled HipHughes, and you'll see that the first link that pops up here in a moment is going to be the link for HipHughes history. So I'm going to click that. And then if you scroll all the way down, you're looking for this right here. So I'll be referring to this document as I'm kind of breezing through the course a little bit here. And you can certainly take your time, pause the video, take a look at kind of numerically where we are and what we're covering, and I think that would be mighty helpful for you guys out there in internet land. So I'm going to turn that off now, and I'm still figuring it out a little bit here how to do this, guys. There we go. And I'm going to get started. So what I'd like you guys to do first is realize that even though there is pre-colonial on an exam, like stuff that happened like way long ago with like old people that are dead and such like that, there's only going to be a couple of questions. You just want to at least geographically place the conquistadors down in South America, of course the English settlers in the North American colonies, and then you're going to put the French basically up in the Canadian region, the northern part of the hemisphere. As long as you kind of get that general idea, I'll let Mr. Richey explain more of the specificity. I really want to get to colonial era, talking about like big ideas that are on the exam. And one of the biggest ideas I believe that you can really use for a free response or for banging away at the multiple choice is really the idea, there we go, really get the big idea across of self-government and representation. When I'm teaching this in class, I'll say all the time, what's the magic word? What's the magic word? And the magic word for my kids, of course, is going to be representation. That's right, the golden arches in terms of what the colonists really are craving for, at least on the test. So one of the ideas that I use is called the M&M concept. And the M&M concept works like this. You never had an M&M your whole life, and then somebody gives you one M&M, it's a little chip, you get the M&M in your mouth, you eat it up, what do you want? You want another M&M. You want another bout, another cupful of representation. So on the exam, one of the big ideas that you can try to hit, or at least kind of like write about, or kind of move into, is the long-term want of the revolution. Look, the short-term wants are much easier. You have very specific legislation when you're looking at the Stamp Act or the Intolerance Act, like what the British were doing at that culminating period, 1773, 74, and 75. But really what I'm doing is I'm looking at way back, like maybe 1619, early 17th century. And in the early 17th century, there is this kind of idea that there is self-governance in the colonies. So I'm going to say the two vocab words with you guys, and as I'm doing that, I'm going to invite Tom Richey again, because I know that Richey's trying to get in here, and I just got to type his name and hit invite again. There we go. And I can see him right there, but I can't hear him yet. Let me see if I can hear him. The M&M concept works like this. I hear me. It's really weird. I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. Richey, if you're listening to me, you got to pause your YouTube video, because I'm watching myself watch myself listen to myself, and it's making me crazy. Like, literally. I'm going to turn this down. I really hope that Richey pops in. So let me go over the two vocab words for you guys. And that would be the House of Burgesses and the Mayflower Compact. Like, I literally want you to think of these two vocab words as M&Ms. And when you're writing about it, because remember, the big ideas are important. Big ideas are umbrellas. Big ideas cover you. They always tell you on the exam to write about, like, thesis and big ideas and theme. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what the M&M concept is. I can be talking about perestroika and glasnost in the Soviet Union. I can be talking about women get the experience of, like, earning a paycheck in World War I. It's the same concept. Those experiences with governing yourself lead to the want for more. So here are the two words. Number one is the Mayflower Compact. And of course, this is a document that is signed by the Pilgrims as they voyage to the New World that's basically creating a compact amongst themselves. Like this idea that they're going to self-govern themselves. They're going to eat M&M. Yeah. They're going to eat an M&M. And they're going to eat that M&M. And they're going to go, man, that tasted good. And then we're going to forget about it for, like, 150 years. But we're not going to forget about it. That's the theme, that the want for self-governance has not gone away. House of Burgesses would be the other one, guys. The House of Burgesses, Jamestown, right? We got, like, John Smith and the whole Pocahontas thing, and the whole colony's falling down and apart. Remember, this is a capitalist venture, a joint stock venture. Bang, bang for the AP vocabulary word, Mr. Hughes. Joint venture company that is really investing in the New World in order to make a profit. These are capitalist guys, right? They like the mo-mo. They like the mo-mo. And when they're not making the mo-mo, they'll do anything they can to make the mo-mo. Did you know that mo-mo is money? Just in case you didn't know. But the idea is that they're going to allow them to self-govern themselves because they're more productive when they do that. So when they create this first house of representation, remember, that's what Congress is. Congress is a house of representation, right? This is what the House of Burgess is. They're electing people. You kind of have to be white, you kind of own property, you have to be red, whatever. But the idea is that that M&M is, oh, ever so sweet. Now, when you're writing about that idea, you want to write about it in terms of long term. When you're talking short term, you're talking really about the revolt against taxes. So let's talk about that next, right? We can't teach you the whole course, guys. We can teach you big ideas. I'm going to invite Richey again. Richey, oh Richey. Tweet Tom Richey. Everybody do that, like right now. 150 of you, 200 of you. Go to Twitter, Tom Richey, Tomriche. Get that guy in here. Tell him he needs to come. I'm going to do it one more time. There we go. We're going to invite him. Invitation posted. And now he's got like 15 tweets. All right. So, true or false? And I'm going to turn one more thing on. There's like a Q&A button here. I don't know what the heck it does. All right. So, true or false? The colonists are opposed to taxation. Okay. True or false? The answer, of course, is true for trolls. It's false. they're not against the idea of taxation. It's a huge misnomer. They understand that you have to pay taxes in order to create a society. They're not like anarchist libertarians that are like, you know, right in Somalia with a pirate ship. These guys understand you need government. The phrase is no taxation without representation. So I want to teach you two things. I want to teach you first why they're opposed to the idea of taxation and that representation idea, but I also want to teach you the idea of what's in the British mindset. Like, why are they taxing us, and what's up their butt, man? Why are they so bang upset with us? Because I think that there's an answer. So I would start with the idea of the French and Indian War. Do you like my accent, the French and Indian War? As I have a terrible accent. And remember, guys, if you're ever lost and you want more info, you can always jump into the playlist. Just go to the YouTube site. There's a U.S. history playlist, yada, yada, yada. Click buttons, learn lots. But I like this idea of the French and Indian War. So the French and Indian War is really a war that we caused out of our own kind of greed, our own kind of manifest exposure. Remember, the Appalachian Mountains are really kind of the western border during this region. Like, if you go into Pennsylvania, you're like gangster town. You're like way out in the middle of nowhere. So the Native Americans and the French particularly, they don't really love the idea of the colonists pushing into kind of their outskirts of their hood. So the French and Indian War is really a war that's fought for the colonists by the British to protect us as we're becoming exposed on this Western front. And then, of course, the British are sending men over, and they're training and spending money and yada, yada, yada. That's a culminating war right there because two things happen. Number one, for the first time, the colonies are working together. You have the Albany Plan of Union. Bang, bang for the vocabulary. Yeah, you absolutely have the Albany Plan of Union. And the Albany Plan of Union, a graduate lives nearby. I'm going to try at their place. That's Mr. Richey on the phone right there. So he's working on it. I have a horrible habit. Okay, it's horrible. Gotta get it right here. It's not smoking. Don't smoke. It's the green monsters. So I'm gonna have a sip because I'm gonna pass out, and then we'll keep going with the French and Indian War. And you guys should go on the Twitter right now and tweet this link out. Let's get some more people in the room. Let's grow our collective brain. Cheers to that. All right. So two things happen. Number one, the Albany Plan of Union unites the colonists. But number two, the British are done, and they're like, bang, bang, you owe me some momo. You owe me money. That's where the taxation comes from. All of this kind of rebellion against this idea of taxation stems from them footing us the bill that protected us. But the problem is we don't have representation in the parliament. That's the big idea. The big idea is that not that we're opposed to all taxation, but that we're opposed to the idea of people taxing us that we didn't choose to tax us. Got it? All right. Now, as we draw closer, that culminating activity leads to conflict. When you have, and I'm not going to do much more, we're going to move on, Boston Tea Party, right? We dump all that tea in the harbor. The British are like, what? No, you didn't. They're reacting because they can't see why you wouldn't pay the taxes because you are represented. I'm your representation. I know you didn't vote for me, but we're British citizens. They don't see us as Americans. They see us as British. So they would go, blimey, mate, why are you all upset? Oh, blimey, bloody limey, why are you upset when we're representing your interests? We're all British. We're all the same family. And we're like, no, we're not. Maybe it's a generational gap. All right, let's move on. Let's get into what I think is huge on the exam. And that would be the Article of Confederation period. I'm not going to fight the Revolutionary War for you. You can do that on your own. And certainly, I'm going to take my jacket off. And certainly, there's going to be ideas that you need to know related to other stuff, like the religious Great Awakening that occurs during this colonial period. Other stuff in terms of specific trade laws and activities in the northern colonies as opposed to the southern colonies. There's some ideas that are in there. But I love teaching the Articles of Confederation, and I think that you really can understand some major ideas about kind of the progression of governmental history and political history throughout the course. So I'm going to grab a piece of paper. And one of the analogies that I use is Ike and Tina Turner. And you certainly can use Chris Brown and Rihanna. It doesn't really matter. You might even like use you and your boyfriend or you and your girlfriend. If you have this power relationship, an abusive, powerful relationship, if you're in that relationship, kids, you gotta get out of it. All right? If you want to, talk to somebody, call the office, get a hug. The big idea in my analogy, and it works for a few things. I'll teach you a couple things here really quick. Is if you think of the colonies as like a Tina Turner kind of figure, a Rihanna kind of figure, somebody that possesses great talent. Like, damn, that girl can sing. But also is weak in the sense that they're controllable, that they don't know who they are yet. That's the colonies, right? Sometimes I'll get a little bit risque. It's risky with a Q, and I'll kind of go, damn, you got some sweet cotton. Wow, yeah. It's that idea that raw materials make us attractive to the outside world. And in my analogy, Ike Turner or Chris Brown, I guess. I think Ike Turner's a little bit more gangster. I'd like to stick with Ike Turner. That Ike Turner, the king or the parliament, whatever you want to call it, that in a sense, they're the controlling force. Sometimes I'll call them, kind of a pimp and prostitute kind of situation. That might be a little inappropriate for some of the kids out there. But the idea is that he doesn't love us for who we are. He loves us for what you got. Whether that's that natural ability or that raw material or got to get that cotton or the tobacco or whatever it is. So when you look at triangular trade and you look at that idea that we're going from Europe and we're going into kind of imperialized Africa for that slave trade in order to go to North America to find those prostitutes, that raw material, and then send that raw material back to back to England for manufacturing, for the street walking, for making the shirt, for making the momo, then you understand that relationship. So really, in a sense, when you do something like the Declaration of Independence, right? What is the Declaration of Independence? The Declaration of Independence, at the end of the day, is nothing but a Dear John, dump your beep letter. It's I don't love you anymore, and here's why. It's Dear King, you suck, you violated my natural rights, bang, bang, John Locke, and what am I going to do? It's just like revolutionary. That's why it leads to revolution. It's revolutionary in the sense that we are telling people, look it, government's got one job. What's government's job? Government's job is to protect your natural rights, which you are born with. Is a slave born free? Is there a slave born a slave? John Locke would say a slave is born free, and then his rights have not been protected. That freedom has been stolen from him. Government's job is to protect liberty. And what Jefferson is saying is, Dear King, not only did you violate my natural rights, but I don't have the ability to get rid of you through consent. Consent of the what? Consent of the governed, right? I tell my kids sometimes, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And the idea is that the chicken are the people. So the egg, therefore, is the government. The egg doesn't birth the chicken. The egg doesn't come first. The people come first. Now, I don't want to get into bird biology, because it's quite disturbing, and it's probably not appropriate for me to be talking about sexual reproduction amongst birds that I know nothing about. But the idea is that in order to make an egg, in order to make a baby, you got to get down, and you got to have consent. We give consent through voting. We go into the voting booth. We go, hey, baby, want to come home with me? Click. We give our consent, and the guy with the girl with the most votes wins our consent. And therefore, if they're doing something you don't like, and I hear people sometimes, without getting political, the government, we have to overthrow the government, blah, blah. You can vote for another government. That's an idea, right? So what Jefferson, back to Jefferson, what Tina Turner is saying is, I didn't pick you, and because you're hitting me, what do I have a right to do? Booyah! I got a right to revolt. That's revolutionary. Jefferson's a revolutionist. He's telling the people of the world that if you don't like your government because they're violating your rights and you don't have a way to change your government, booyah, revolution. Now, we're getting there. The idea, the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution. You didn't know that. I don't even know if we should show up to the exam, to be honest with you. Our first egg. You get it? Because it's the one that we created. The colonies came together as states during the Revolutionary War as it starts, and they form a government. They form an egg. And that's called the Articles of Confederation. You ready for a huge concept? You better sit down because it's going to blow your mind. You got to know what federalism is, right? Federalism, our form of government. So, what I'm going to do is take this piece of paper. This isn't a magic trick, by the way. I'm not going to make it disappear. Right? turn into a rabbit. So the idea is that this is the power that Tina Turner possesses. This is all of what she's got. So from now on, because she's so fearful of handing that power over to another abusive man, she's going to do a couple things. Number one, she's going to divide her power. She's going to divide her power because therefore then it can't be in one controlling hand. And then she's going to say, look it, I'm going to divide it again. I'll divide it like that. And I'll tell you what, federal government, I'll tell you what, centralized government, I'll tell you what, that you think you be Ike Turner. You ain't Ike Turner. What's the opposite of strong? She's going to give the federal government that. That didn't work. We slow-mo that, huh? She's going to give the federal government only a little bit of power. Why? Because she don't want to get whooped. Because she doesn't trust the government. That's why. So you can memorize it, you can do whatever you want, but besides federalism, federalism is the division of power between the federal government and the states. Tina's the states, the feds is Ike, the central government. So the idea is that the articles are put together in a way where they're almost built to fail, where the federal government is almost like if it was a man, was like addicted to heroin, has no legs, can't speak, is on the couch, homeless, there's no couch, is on the street with no job. And that's not really going to be helpful for the country. I can understand why they don't trust central government. There's people today, there's libertarians today, there's people that are anti-government today that would say, let's go back to the articles. Let's go back to where states maintain the power. Power closest to the people is best. But let's look at some specificity in the Articles of Confederation. Number one, I'm going to invite Tom. Let me invite Tom. I'm going to get a sip of my Monster. And when I do that, I'm going to play a song. This is called This Ain't Working, I think. Listen to this. It's a pretty good song. How? Why? She don't want to get whooped. I keep hearing me because I think that I'm playing in the background. Sounds like I'm playing. Just take like a 30-second breather, guys. I don't know. I'm going to invite Tom again, and then we'll just keep going. My dogs are barking. I got Rainbow Circle. I'm sweating. What are we going to do? You got to pass the exam. All right, so we're going to hit plus for Tom again, Mr. Richey. I know he wants to come in. The guy's like the book of knowledge, man. Go watch his videos. Go subscribe to Tom Richey right now. Give him 150 subs. See what happens. He'll blow his mind. All right, we got him invited. Let me play a little. I can't play the music because YouTube plays in the background. Now, let me take a sip of the Monster. Can I do that? Bang, bang, I got two. All right, we're going to get started, guys. Thanks for waiting. Let me just take a little sip, please. I don't think that's healthy. Just saying. All right. I'm not going to worry about the sweat. We're going to keep going, guys. Go subscribe to YouTube videos, Twitters. Okay. So going back to that analogy, keep ripping pieces of paper, right? What's in this piece? Well, I call this lecture The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And the idea is very simple, that there's very little good in this government. And you can disagree, that's fine, it's just a concept. But if you look at what's in this power, the federal government is only one branch. It's one Congress. All 13 states get one vote. You need 13 to amend the Articles of Confederation. So in a sense, you have 13 brothers and sisters, and they all have to agree, like which show they're going to watch, what donut they're going to pick. It's very hard for them to act in unison. You need 9 out of 13 to pass a law, because they were very fearful of government. So they didn't really give government like a lot of fluidity to do things. Like there's a lot of slow change mechanisms. There's no president, of course, because there's one branch. There's no court system. There's no power of taxation. There's no interstate commerce. There's no real military in the federal sense. There's no post office. There's no connectiveness. I think that's the big idea. So states maintain all the power. Now, two things. We're going to get to Shays Rebellion, and then we'll move on to something like Washingtonian stuff, and that's all good. But what I'd like to get to is this idea of, oh, yeah, Mama got pregnant. No, I'm not crazy. I might be a little bit crazy, but this is a really great, funny joke way to remember a really kind of what sounds like an obscure law. And sometimes those are the killer ones, the ones that'll get you on a free response, or the one that is centered in a DBQ, or it's on multiple choice, you never heard it before. So when I say this vocab word, and the word is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, if you say it like that, you're not going to remember it unless you're like really smart and study all the time. There's kids like that. So I want you to say it like this. Oh, it's the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, Mama, yeah. Because the idea is this. You guys all know about manifest destiny, right? Manifest destiny, of course, is this kind of progression in the American spirit, destiny by God, whatever you want to call it, that drives us like a force of nature. I don't know if this is west, but I'm moving westward, right? I'm like Louisiana Purchase, the Mexican War, the Oregon Territory, gold. And the idea is that I'm going coast to coast. Well, what the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is, it's the legs of manifest destiny. It's the process by which we can move westward to acquire new states. So when I say, oh, Mom got pregnant, the idea is that she has the ability to birth new children, new states. And there's a very specific process. If Mr. Richey ever gets here, we can tell you about it. But that is a really great idea that links into manifest destiny, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. So that's the good. We've done the bad of the Articles of Confederation. And then I would wrap up with Shays Rebellion. I see Richey coming in. Richey's trying to come in. And I keep turning myself and I hear myself. And I don't know why. Why do you guys know why? Why do I hear myself when I turn on that video? Take a little 30-second break here. We're doing good. You guys are hanging in there. And if we can get Richey in here, he'll answer questions. And I'm going to go to my Twitter really quick and see what you guys are saying. And you might be like, you suck. That's okay. I'll get by. There's people shouting it out. Good. Newton, South Global! Good for us. Okay, good for us. Keep watching. Okay, I think I'm just going to keep going. All right. I can't listen, though. Just listen. So the process that Mr. Richey ever gets here, we can tell you about it, but that is a really great idea. Can't do that. That's cray-cray. All right, so I'm just going to keep going, guys, okay? I think that's okay. So I want to get to this idea of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've done the good. Oh, yes. Northwest Ordinance 1787. Right, we've done that. We've done the bad in terms of that weakness. I'll keep ripping the paper, guys. You can say it with me right now, right? Here we go. Federalism is the division of between the, and in the articles, this is the Fed and this is the states. This is the parent, this is the child. And that's the problem. That's the problem. The problem is that the parent is the little baby. And the baby can't tell what to do. There's no power there. So let's do the ugly. The ugly is Shays Rebellion. So Shays Rebellion occurs in 1786, the year before the end of the Articles of Confederation. It occurs, I believe, in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Western Mass. It doesn't really matter. Let's say New England. I'm going to really get this right. I'm going with Massachusetts. Double or nothing. Daniel Shay, Massachusetts. But Daniel Shay is a gangster. Daniel Shay was a revolutionary soldier. Daniel Shay fought for the country. So this guy's got lead in him. He's bled for the Declaration of Independence. Trying to join the call, get nothing. Okay, Richey. I'm going to invite him one more time. Because we want this to work. Because it's like 2014. And we should be able to do this because we're not, dumb. All right. Invitation posted. Could you try to call me again? I'm going to call him. You guys mind? I know you're kind of hanging out. I don't want to make you wait, So we're going to do this right now. Here we go. Good luck. I'm doing it for real. We'll do phone. And there's Tom Richey. And we'll put him on speaker and see what we get. So we're going to do Shays Rebellion. I'm not going to forget. I'm watching the numbers. We got a number of people waiting here. Here we go. Let's see what he's got to say for self-food. Tom Richey.
Yeah.
So I just invited you again. We're live right now. The kids are looking at my phone with your name on it.
Okay, yeah. I'm pressing the thing to come in, and it's still not allowing it. Now, let me try, one kind of last ditch thing. Let me see if I can get on through my phone, perhaps.
Okay, I just sent you another invite. I'll keep doing it. If you can come in, we'd love to have you.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to be there. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully the students will, maybe if they've got questions, they can tweet them at me at Tom Richey, and I will keep trying to get on.
Yeah, that would be great. And guys, if you do that, if you tweet Tom Richey, Tom can then text me messages with your questions, because I'm having a hard time trying to like lecture and look at questions and stuff like that. And then I lost the call. Oh, hashtag losing. Hashtag losing. All right, so let's keep going. I'm ready. Here we go, okay? Let's do Shays Rebellion. So Daniel Shay comes back from the Revolutionary War. He lives in like Western Massachusetts, double or nothing in Western Massachusetts. And after, like 5 or 6 years, he's really feeling as though his voice isn't being heard in his state government. He's being overtaxed in his mind. There's liens on property. They're not getting, their debts paid back in time, so they're taking their property. And there's a lot of anger amongst the poor Western Massachusetts people that they're not being represented on the other side, on the coast where the capital is. So after a while, they basically go back to that idea of the Declaration of Independence. What did Jefferson say? Jefferson said, if you don't like your government, you don't feel like you can change it, you can go overthrow it. So they grab their guns, grab your youngins, grab your guns, Daniel Shay is coming. And I can almost see it in my mind, kind of more the elite people and the other side of New England, watching kind of this ragtag band of ex-revolutionary soldiers marching with guns towards the state capitol. They must have been like, I saw Richey. I see Richey.
All right.
So, Richey, can you hear me?
Right, I'm on, but I need to get in a place where I've got some better light. A little more light would be good.
So my problem is that I can hear my lecture as I turn my sound up. After like 5 or 6 years. So do you know what the problem is, Tom? How I can stop that?
Oh, you need to mute your computer because that's the same problem. You've got a little bit of lag, so you want to just mute the volume on your computer.
Massachusetts people that they're not being represented. Does that work?
There you go. Okay.
Okay, I can't hear you though.
Okay, you still can't hear me.
I can't hear you because if I turn the sound up, I hear me.
Okay. The sound on, not the sound. Okay, try this. Not the sound on.
You do thumbs up and talk, and when you're done, do thumbs down and I'll go. Is that a thumbs up? You understand? Okay, so let me finish Daniel Shay. I'm telling the story of Shays Rebellion, and then if you want to take 10 minutes and go back a little bit, all I've really done with these kids is gone over kind of the idea of like House of Burgesses and the idea of French and Indian War. If you want to touch upon maybe like Great Awakening stuff, is that colonial? Am I right?
Yeah, let me.
Okay, let me finish then. Okay, I'm going to go. So let's finish Shays Rebellion, guys. So here's the idea. Daniel Shay is really, in a sense, scared the crap out of these people. He's scared the crap out of them, and what they basically done is kind of pulled the 9/11 jar. The 9/11 phone? There's no phones. What am I talking about? They basically grabbed the phone, and they're calling for help. Federal government, man, we got this. We got a problem. You got to help us. Send some armed forces. There's no army. So the federal government, which is like this big, has to call the states, and I believe it was only Virginia that sent any armed forces. So really, Shays Rebellion is going to putter out. It's not the idea that the rebellion worked. It's the idea that there's like this kind of awakening. We're going to go to Great Awakening in a second. That we need a stronger federal government. Maybe it's the people that are controlling the economic systems that want it. Maybe it's a democratic idea. I don't know. But it's the idea that Shays Rebellion is going to pull down the Articles of Confederation. Originally, as we go to the Constitutional Convention, I'm not going to do that with you. We're going to turn it over to Richey. The Constitutional Convention is originally meant to amend the Articles. What did I say before? How many states had to agree? How many kids had to agree to get the jelly donut? All of them. So when Rhode Island doesn't show up, Rhode Island's like, I'm not going. I like the Articles of Confederation. That's when it falls apart. That's when we have to start anew. And as I grab my piece of paper, that's when the Constitutional Convention will start ripping new pieces and writing a new constitution. So I'm going to let Richey take over. Richey's going to take you through some colonial ideas, and when he's done, he is going to put something on the screen so I can see it, like a thumbs down, so I'll take over. And here we go. You ready? Oh, I got to click your face here.
Okay, so Keith, there should be a way to hear me without, if you've got the YouTube stream on, like the actual call that we're doing between you and me is distinct from what's on YouTube. So when I've been experiencing lag, it's been because the YouTube stream is on, and I've been able to do a two-way call by just putting like whatever's on the YouTube stream page, turning that off, but keeping the actual Google Plus Hangout page, I can keep the volume on that. Does that make sense at all? Can you hear me? Let's see, I see Noam Chomsky. I don't see or hear Keith. Wait, I think I heard Keith. Keith, are you there? Can you hear me? Let's see. I'm in this video. Well, let's see if this, all right. Keith, I don't even know if I'm on the air. Okay. Huh? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing is, what I was saying is that, you know, there is the YouTube page where this thing's streaming on YouTube, and then there is the thing where you and I are talking on the Google Plus page. And so those two things are distinct. So as long as the volume is off on that stream where it's actually
right now
streaming,
I can hear you and I don't hear me.
What's that?
I don't know what happened, but right now it's working good because I can hear you and you can hear me. Is this what's on YouTube?
Okay, yeah, and the thing is that the actual YouTube page is probably about a minute or two behind where
let's
we
keep
are.
going. I'm good. So you go.
Okay.
Go.
So that's the problem. All right, so I just kind of got in here. I'm improvising, so I know the light looks like I'm going to be telling campfire stories or something like that. I think Keith wanted me to talk about the Great Awakening. That's something that might be a priority for some folks. So the Great Awakening is about, you know, I'm being kind of improv here. Established religions, okay? You think about the colonies had these established religions such as the Church of England. You had the Congregational churches in New England. And, you know, you had, you know, various other churches that were established. Well, the Great Awakening was a movement where, you know, of course, you've got these old ministers coming from schools like Harvard and Yale, and really the religious elite. That's what's important to note, is that the ministers at that time, they weren't just like spiritual leaders, but they were also the most educated people in their communities at that time. So, you know, these ministers are actually, you know, they've learned like Latin and Greek and all of that stuff in addition to religious studies. And so what happens here is that the Great Awakening is about the promotion of emotional religion, okay? Whereas, you know, instead of a religion that is more rational and more liturgical and that sort of thing. So, you know, kind of like there's this billboard in this town where I teach, and I saw this billboard a few years ago. It had this guy in jeans and a Hawaiian shirt, and he was holding a Bible, and it said, "Could this be church.com or something?" And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, yeah, that doesn't look like church to me personally. Now, for other people, for someone who is disillusioned by the regular church establishment, they might be thinking, I want something different. So the Great Awakening, yeah, Keith might think, hey, that might look kind of fun, you know, where I'm like, hey, where's the guy's robe? You know, where is the incense? I don't smell anything. That sort of thing. So, you know, that's the thing which when you think about the more educated established classes, the merchants and all of these folks that are part of the elite, they tend to go to the more established churches. Whereas the more dispossessed classes, they're thinking, I want something emotional in my religion. You know, I don't want to just go over there and observe these ceremonies and that sort of thing. So what happens here is, you know, people start basically, you know, putting on a show. Like, they don't go to Harvard and Yale, but there are these itinerant preachers, these preachers that travel, and they're going around preaching this very emotional religion and really just saying this hellfire and brimstone, like, you're going to hell. You know, some people just like to be told, you're going to hell. That's, you know, Keith likes to be told that once in a while. Now, you know, what happens here is you've got Jonathan Edwards' sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, where he says you're hanging by a thread, you know, that God has got you. He is angry at your sin, and the devil could get you at any time. And it is only because of his grace that he hasn't just let you go. Keep in mind, predestination is mixed in with this. You know, I'm going to contrast a little bit the first and second Great Awakening, whereas the first Great Awakening is about, like, God, that you're in the hands of God and God's angry with you, but he's merciful. Whereas the second Great Awakening is influenced more by Arminianism, which is you have a choice. Okay, so the second Great Awakening, both of them are focused on a conversion experience, but the second Great Awakening is more focused on you. Now, I've actually got a video on the second Great Awakening that I'm going to plug. You know, just look up Tom Richey on YouTube, or if you look up Second Great Awakening, it should come up. It's one that I did a while ago, but it's been helpful to a lot of people. So if you're curious about the Second Great Awakening, go ahead and go to my channel. That's Tom for America at YouTube, or you can just type in Tom Richey, Tomrichey. After you type the R and I, you should see me. Or Tom Richey, U.S. History, Tom Richey, Second Great Awakening. But the First Great Awakening is mostly about this sovereignty of God and how you are a sinner. But the thing is, what happens here is the crowd starts to follow these preachers who engage in this more emotional preaching. And it starts to get really ugly because these more emotional preachers start to say, like, well, you know what? These established preachers with degrees from Harvard and Yale, they're not called to preach. And there's this one guy that put out this tract about the danger of an unconverted ministry. So one of the biggest things about the Great Awakening when it comes to the APUSH exam is to note that it calls these social divisions between the old whites, the people who preferred the more established churches and the more traditional liturgical worship, and the new lights, these people who liked this new religion. Okay, so keep in mind that that is one of the biggest things there. That's the difference between this more emotional and the more traditional religion, is the social division that was created there. So I'm going to turn it back over to Keith, and hopefully I can keep improving my lighting situation that I'm kind of improvising over here.
So what I just did, guys, is I'm looking for my screen so I can see it. It's weird not looking at it. I just look on the comments below the video, and I just put Tom Richey's YouTube site, and you definitely want to click that and subscribe right now, because you're going to be using that and recommending it to your friends, and giddy up for plugging YouTube sites, because it's the cool thing to do. And you could win a unicorn, and you don't want to go to hell. All right. So what I'd like to do now is I could spend years on the Constitution. All right, and like, you know, Mr. Richey, I got videos, the Constitution for Dummies series. I just
you don't really take it all that seriously sometimes, but
well, you know, I try to take everything lighthearted in life. What are you gonna do?
You know, Keith, you want to do a little Jefferson versus Hamilton at some point? Like, you know, you let me know when you're there, but you know, we can kind of pass this back and forth.
Yeah, I kind of think they're both a little bit of an ass, but we can flip a coin. I think I like Jefferson better than Hamilton.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed.
Well, you know, there's a difference between, like, someone who believes in, like, centralized power now as to somebody who believed in centralized power then. I think there's a different intention sometimes. You know, there's an economic intention rather than a progressive intention. But we could talk about that another day for sure. Wow, it sounded like you still fell over. Did you fall over?
Oh, yeah, I'm still trying. I mean, I don't have a place to anchor that. I'm actually on my iPhone because my main camera didn't work, so that's what I'm doing here.
It looks great.
I'm sort of improvising, but I'm at this place that I've never been before, and this room's kind of like It's like I'm running the log cabin campaign of 1840. I mean, this place is I'm like William Henry Harrison in here. I mean, look at that. That's where I am. Log cabin and hard cider campaign is what I'm about over here.
Make sure you wear a jacket at your inauguration. All right, I'm going to hit the Constitution, guys. Here we go, okay? So back to that idea that the Articles failed because the feds were too weak. The Constitution Convention is really an episode in creating a federal government that has more strength, which can survive the day, has flexibility in order to deal with new problems, but also has limits and controls, so there's no kind of out-of-whackness. And, of course, ideology is going to guide how you feel about those principles, but those are the main principles I want to talk about that work out at the Constitutional Convention. So I'm going to do first the compromises. This is really fast and really quick, but I think it's really important. I go back to that magic word. If you watch the beginning of the video, I was yelling about kind of the magic word of America, like the most important word when it comes to governmental power, and I'll give you a hint. You ready? Representation, right? We talked about that with the House of Burgesses and the Mayflower Compact in terms of federalism and Tina Turner in terms of the Articles of Confederation. All of those ideas are now culminating in this new relationship between the states and the federal government. So I go to that R word to talk about the Great Compromise. Now, if you were in a United States like a state course, they'd be calling it the Great Compromise. But the AP exam is going to call it by its righteous name, the Connecticut Compromise. And you're going to take the Connecticut Compromise, and then from there you're going to hopefully understand that there's a New Jersey plan and a Virginia plan. There's a large state plan and a small state plan, in the sense of how do you represent the children in the family? How do you represent the states in the federal government? And in the old times, in Articles, you had one Congress. Everybody had one vote. And by the way, New Jersey loves that. New Jersey's like, yeah, because that would give them equal representation in the legislature. Virginia, on the other hand, is like, oh, no, you didn't say that again. We think RORA should be based on pop-pop. Can you figure out what pop-pop is? We want representation based on population, because, of course, there's more people in Virginia. And that's going to lead to the census and why we count heads every 10 years. It's also going to be relatable to the Electoral College. And this isn't a government exam, so I'm going to breeze through this so we can get into more of the culture and social stuff. But the big idea is that if you can't make one happy and the other happy, you either got to piss them both off or make them both happy. And I think we made them both happy. And what we did is, instead of having a one-house Congress, we have a two-house Congress. That's the Connecticut plan. Sometimes they'll call it a bicameral legislature. And then one of my kids asked, does that mean that it's something to do with the camera that likes the boys and girls? Oh. A bicameral legislature is going to create a Senate, which is equal representation. Every state has 2 senators, and New Jersey's like, booyah! And then we have a House of Representation. And that House is based on, we take every 10 years, and then, we can have Virginia going, booyah! And the result is going to be not only that compromise idea, but also, I think, the idea of more of a limited government, that you have less of a chance of a piece of legislation breezing through the government, because now you have to have it go through both the House and the Senate in order to reach the president's desk. We're not doing all the checks and balances. I can't do that with you guys. But what we can do is hit these big compromises. And I'd like to do 3/5 with you really quick. So the 3/5 compromise is specific to the House of Representation. The House of Representation, as we just previously mentioned, is based on based on PUPA. So the 3/5 compromise directly relates to the idea of how do we count people. And you would say, Mr. Hughes, that's easy. You just count people. Like there's someone and there's someone. The problem is back then we have a problem defining someone. We have slavery. So we have this kind of split, not between large states and small states, but we have a split between north states and southern states. And really, Virginia and the Virginia plan are talking about that through what they want. They want, in a sense, slaves to count when it comes to representation, but not taxation, because the census would also dictate how much a state paid in taxes. The North is the flip side of that pancake. They want slaves not to count in the census, because that would give more power to the southern states. I hear like noises. I think it's a ghost. But at the end of the day, you get that disgusting fraction. Wow!
Hey, you don't let us count. Hey, you don't let me count my slaves. I'm out of here.
Now you're really going to hell.
I'm going to walk out of this thing. Okay, that's how South Carolina rolls.
Well, I'm sure some people in South Carolina, maybe
not anymore. I'm just playing a role. Yeah, I did not just make a statement.
I get it.
Slavery, but I thought I'd just chime in there for a Southern perspective. Keep going.
I was going to say that we're having all these technical problems. You should give Obama a pass on the website. It's a healthcare joke. All right, here we go. So I'm going to continue. 3/5 compromise. I'd like to get past the Constitution and then turn it back over to Mr. Richey so we can talk a little bit about kind of like the social and cultural big ideas that are occurring in terms of like women's roles in the early 19th century and all that gravy stuff on the exam. So 3/5 compromise, guys. At the end of the day, that's the number you want to remember. For every 5 slaves, you would get 3 people counted towards the census. So in a sense, yeah, they're going to pay more taxes because they have these slaves, human beings living in their states, but they're also going to get representation for citizens that aren't citizens, for people that can't vote. I think I read once, and Richey can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's historians that have basically predicted that if the 3/5 compromise wasn't to be, that if slaves weren't counted in the census, that the Electoral College results probably would have been different for 1800. Jefferson really got elected, in a sense, off the representation from the 3/5 compromise. But that's for another day. You got the 3/5 compromise. The last thing I'd like to talk about is this kind of battle between the feds and the anti-feds. And I think that'll kind of graciously kind of bring us in to the 19th century. And then Richey will talk the cultural social, and then I can take it over from G. Washington and take you through some like foreign policy and domestic stuff that you need to know. But at the end of the day, what we have is a constitution that's finished. Checks and balances, 3 branches. We have delegated power, reserved for the, all these big ideas. But at the end of the day, when it goes to the states, there's a number of states, they needed 9, I believe, to pass it, that wouldn't do it. That would say, no, we're not giving up our power. We're not comfortable. Go back to Tina Turner. We don't trust this guy. We think he might have a little bit of Ike in him, and we need some protection. We need like some mace or some brass knuckles or some give me like a stun gun. Yo, don't stun me, bro. Give me one of those, and then I'll walk with you. So, in a sense, that's what the Bill of Rights is. That's what the anti-feds want. Listen to the word, anti-fed, anti-central government. And what those anti-feds, which are really, kind of the Southern idea, the Jeffersonian idea, the state power idea, the, don't trust the big government idea, what they're saying is, give me mace, give me a shield, give me the Bill of Rights, and I'll walk with you. And that Bill of Rights, those first 10 amendments are critical in terms of really sealing the deal, creating, the compromise needed to get ratification. So you can look at the Bill of Rights. I have tons of videos on them. I would say definitely know, at least at a minimum, know your 1, 2, and 4, and your 5 and your 6. Definitely know 10, because 10 is huge in federalism, making sure, in a sense, that that state power is reserved. Anything not in the Constitution is reserved for the states, but then there's a whole bunch of flexibility we can argue about another day. I'm going to now turn it over. I want Mr. Richey, if you could, what's on the AP exam when it comes to like early American life, early 1800s, like the role of women, the pioneer? Is there stuff on the exam about that?
Okay, as far as that goes, now, Keith, I just saw on Twitter there was somebody that was saying that I was still on the screen while you were talking, that I was still
I was little me. I
okay, so yeah, make sure that, I guess, when you're talking, you'll be able to see on the screen now.
No!
Now, it should be switching to you anytime you're talking now, but this person was saying that I was on the screen the whole time while you were talking.
Yeah,
and I think you should be able to see on your screen since you're on a desktop computer.
The thing is I keep looking at the camera, and I'm not looking down.
Okay, gotcha.
Whoever that is on Twitter, you're a gangster. You're going to get a 5 for doing that. All right, go ahead, Mr. Richey. My bad.
All right. So now one thing as far as social history around this time, I was just talking to my students about women, especially when you think about, okay, so at this time when the, at the American Revolution, when the Constitution's ratified, women can't own property in their own right. There might be certain exceptions when, there is a woman who's never been married or a widow and there's no man to take over the property. But if there is a single man in the family family that can take over the property, whether that be a husband or a brother or anybody like that, then the man would take over that property. Of course, women are not voting or anything like that. Women are not attending universities until the late 19th century. So keep that in mind, that women are still going to be shut out of public life. But one thing that's very important about the American Revolution is this emphasis on republicanism. Okay, now I'm not talking about the Republican Party, but small r republicanism, which is about limited government, agrarianism, and really promoting a virtuous citizenry. These people had studied the Roman Republic. I've got my Roma shirt on here. The Roman Republic, and they believed that the Roman Republic fell when people ceased to be virtuous, when the Roman Republic became urbanized. Then the Republican form of government failed because the idea of a virtuous citizenry failed. Jefferson believed that agrarianism was just imperative. He said that when we start living in cities like Europe, then we're not going to be able to have a republican form of government. Jefferson had been to Europe. He'd seen those big old dirty, nasty cities. So it's very important to keep in mind that most Americans at that point were rural. Let's say, okay, so Keith didn't say anything. I thought he was saying, yeah, Keith lives in a dirty, nasty city, and I'm here in a log cabin, okay? So, I've got this whole, Jeffersonian thing going on here. Keith looks like he wants to say something.
No, keep going. Go.
Oh, okay, all right. Just trying to read those nonverbals. I'm failing miserably. Okay, so anyway, now let's use a hashtag. If any of you are I've got Twitter in front of me, but I've got a lot of AP Euro stuff. Okay, I teach AP US and AP Euro, and I've made a lot more AP Euro videos this year, and so I'm getting AP Euro stuff. So if you are, if you're doing this, do a hashtag like, Richey Hughes or something like that, Richey Hughes Hangout or HipHughes Hangout or something like that. So when I look there, I can see that you're talking about this hangout, because I've got something from Allie Lills, and she says talk about the post-Cold War period, specifically the fall of communism in Russia with Gorbachev and the disarmament treaties. I don't know if she's talking about Euro or she's talking about this.
I bet they're worried about that for U.S. They're worried about the second part of the exam. So
right, yeah. So I'm just going to
take 2 minutes. Finish up what you're going on, and then we're going to hit early federal. I want to breeze to Civil War, get to 20th century. I can go a little farther than 9:30 if I have to, but you guys have to get to sleep too. So go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, so what I'm going to ask, though, is that people that are here on this hangout, just hashtag me. I'm kind of done talking about the social history for that period, so just keep in mind, let me know that you're talking specifically about this hangout and you're not asking a question about AP Euro, because when people say, like, the Cold War or something, that could apply to either one.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, so I'm going to breeze to Civil War, because you're right. You need 20th century stuff. In fact, half of the essays are going to be on 20th century stuff, so we got to get there. So I give you the idea of strong... Yeah.
Okay, so the essays, technically you're almost there, Keith. Now, basically, the midpoint of the essays, you'll have the DBQ, which could come from anywhere. It's not going to come from typically pre-1600 or post-1980. And then you've got the FRQs. You've got a choice of two, The cutoff is Reconstruction. 1877 is your cutoff. So half the course goes to 1877. And typically, one of those essays is going to be before, like, the Constitution. Like, one of them will either be, like, before 1800, something about either colonial America or early national America, whereas the second essay in that first group of two is typically going to be about something between 1800 and 1877. Then you get to the second group of essays, and the first essay is going to be somewhere between like the Gilded Age and the Depression, and the second of those essays is going to be between the Depression and 1980. Okay, so just to clarify that, you've got an 1877 cutoff. So yeah, we probably do need to kind of move on. Once he finishes the Civil War, we'll hit some post 1877 stuff.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna hopscotch through, like, big ideas. I didn't click me. It's that gangster kid before Bailey or something like that. There you go. All right. So one way to remember big concepts, because I think that's what we have to do. It's getting late. We got to just do big concepts. Is that I kind of nicknamed 3 humongous leaders in the early federal era as Schwarzenegger. If you don't know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is, kind of this like big beefy movie star, governor of California guy, Rambo, all this stuff. Not Rambo, that's the other guy, the Terminator, whatever. But it's just kind of this visual of a big, strong guy. So I'll call George Schwarzenegger Washington, John Schwarzenegger Marshall, and Alexander Schwarzenegger Hamilton. And the concept, the big idea is that each one of them did things to strengthen the federal government and nationalize the country in a sense. I always give Hamilton like a tattoo of like a gangster dollar sign because he's going to be the father of the Treasury and the National Bank. He's going to argue for the whiskey tax, which leads to the Whiskey Rebellion. And he's really going to argue for the use of like interstate commerce and the elastic clause to strengthen the role of the federal government. Washington I call a Schwarzenegger for a number of reasons, strengthening the executive, unwritten constitution, but also for his enforcement of people not paying their taxes at the Whiskey Rebellion. You know, the idea that people weren't going to follow the federal government was tested early on. We have that occurring today. People that are kind of thumbing their nose at the federal government. Well, when people did that to Washington, he trampled them like a little boy. He stepped on their faces. That's the Whiskey Rebellion and kind of the enforcement of executive action and the supremacy clause. And then John Schwarzenegger Marshall. He's really the father of the Supreme Court decisions that are going to give the federal government breadth and scope, whether it's Marbury versus Madison, which gives the power of judicial review, or it's McCulloch versus Maryland, which is an upholding of the National Bank, or Gibbons versus Ogden, which is an enforcement of the or expansion of the Interstate Commerce Clause. All of them, in a sense, I know I have my shirt on so you can't see all my ripping muscles, this idea of Schwarzeneggerism, of expanding like the role of the federal government and nationalizing the country, like creating more of a unity factor, I guess, and maybe that's the wrong way of saying it, but definitely a stronger economy, a stronger transportation system. We can talk about that more stuff later. But really the big idea, and this is maybe what the essay is going to be on, Mr. Richey was talking about it before, is really, I think, the build-up to the Civil War. I start the Civil War with really Jefferson and Hamilton, kind of, you know, whether it's in 1800 or the concept of nullification. Nullification was a Jeffersonian idea that the states had the right to nullify laws that they found unconstitutional, deeply offensive, like the Alien Sedition Act, the Kentucky-Virginia resolutions. This is really authored in the Jeffersonian spirit by saying the states have a right as their own entities to reject federal measures that go beyond the scope of the Constitution. And the response to that is really going to be eventually Civil War. You have a number of episodes like whether it's Jacksonian actions like the Indian Removal Act or the vetoing of the National Bank. You have this pull between state power and federal power. But I really want to talk about the legislative power and sectionalism. Sectionalism, I'm going to say that the Civil War is really fought not over slavery, but over the expansion of slavery and really the defining of the supremacy clause. So I start in 1820. You have this idea of manifest destiny. We've done this before, right? Moving westward across my computer screen. But as we do that, as we get, you know, mama gonna get pregnant, as we do that, we're creating this confrontation in the legislature between the North and the South, not just over slavery, but over those issues in federalism, over nullification, over economic issues, over commerce issues, over the differences, really, between a more agrarian society and a more urbanized society, a trade society as a crop society. But either way, when we get new states, when Mama Awning got pregnant, we have this face of what are we going to do with this new state? Is it going to be a slave state? Are we going to give the South more representation in the legislature to enforce what they want, to get what they want? Or are we going to make it a free soil state where we can have labor and immigration and more economic free labor in these states? And that's the tipping point that makes us have to face each other. Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise, 1820, is, I call it the invisible line. You ever get in a fight with your brother or sister, you stare in a room, and you're like, you know what we should do? We should put tape down the middle of the room, and what's on your side is your side, and what's on my side is my side. That's the stupidest thing ever. That's the stupidest thing ever. No, Chomsky, what are they doing? And when we do that, when we create this imaginary line across the United States between the North and the South, with Missouri being the only state that doesn't, falls on the wrong side, we're basically coming up with the idea we would just get a line, and if they're in the South, it will be a slave state. And then if it's in the North, it would be a free state. Problem solved. It's like we're gushing blood from this problem of slavery and expansionism, and we put a Band-Aid on it, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because we have a number of states that are going to come in, and they're going to cross that bridge and create this new conflict of what do we do? What do we do again? So in 1850, we have the Compromise of 1850. How stupid is that? It's easy to remember. And in that compromise, we come up with this solution. And this is really a patchwork. You have to remember everything in this stupid solution. But we come up with, well, we'll let states vote. We'll let the people vote. Popular sovereignty. We let Maine come in as a free state. California comes in as a free state. Or maybe it's just California. And then we pass the Fugitive Slave Act to give the South something. I call this the stink don't stink until it's in your backyard thesis. That when we do that, when we say now Northerners are culprits in slavery, you have to turn over your slaves. When you bring that stink of slavery to the North, people can smell it. You have a rise in abolitionism. I've always said that stink that comes and wakes up the abolitionists isn't inside the power of government, it's at the outside of the power of government. So in a sense, the abolitionists are screaming at the government, end slavery, we don't want slavery. And inside the government, you have people like Abraham Lincoln now coming up in the ranks, the Free Soil Party. They're more interested in economic freedom than slavery ending. So in a sense, the South, I think, misjudged the situation. And I could be wrong about that. Richey can correct me in a moment. But I think that the South saw abolitionists in power when abolitionists were outside of power. But they saw the smoke of abolitionism, and they thought that's what they wanted. So when Lincoln gets elected, well, actually I would go to the Dred Scott decision. In 1857, you have the Dred Scott decision, right? Slaves are property. There can be no more talk about free slaves, no more states where slaves are slaves or slaves are slaves. And what the Supreme Court did is they lit the fuse of the Civil War because they stopped the ability of the legislator to deal with the stupid problem. They said, you're not going to deal with the problem. I'll deal with it, slaves. And what they've done now is really they've created an unalienable situation that's going to blow up with the election of Lincoln. Lincoln is your first Republican president. He starts as a northern free soiler, talking about economic ideas. That's the Republican Party is rooted in that idea of economics, of good for us. Now we got the Civil War. We're going to bang that. I'm going to ask Mr. Richey if you want to take 5 or 10 minutes before we move on to more of industrial and we go to the 20th century. What do you want to say about that? About like anything else, like I'm skipping.
Okay. Let's see. There was I've had some questions about the Gilded Age. I mean, you want to talk about the Civil War or something like that? I mean,
no, I think we should go.
As far as I'm concerned, we lost. You won, right? I mean, that's kind of settled.
Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy?
Gnome over there is my daddy.
Okay, so go ahead. Go
yeah. So let me go ahead and talk about the economic impact of the Civil War, which I think is kind of important, because keep in mind that you've got this whole, and I agree with Keith 100% that this Jeffersonian Hamiltonian conflict is just completely central to U.S. history because Jefferson is looking for a lesser role for the federal government, a government that is laissez-faire, a government that does not involve itself in the economy, versus a Hamiltonian vision where the government is actively promoting economic development. And, you've got these Jeffersonian Southern Democrats who are in the Congress before the Civil War, who they continually thwart internal improvements. You've got Henry Clay's American System, which is a Hamiltonian inspired plan for internal improvements, a protective tariff, and a national bank. Okay, I think about PIN or NIP. PIN or NIP, typically NIP, because PIN could be spelled two ways. So national bank, internal improvements, protective tariff. And this had caused a lot of arguments before the Civil War. Now, once the South seceded and all these Southern Democrats are out of the way, the people that are left, the solid sectional Republican majority, passes the Pacific Railway Act, they pass the Homestead Act, You know, they have, you know, some other things going on that they are promoting this active government. The Pacific Railway Act, for the first time, gives government money, subsidies, directly to corporations. Before that, you know, Hamilton, as far back as Hamilton, he wanted subsidies for corporations to promote manufacturing. And you know, the Jeffersonians were like, no, we don't want that. So this really changes things as far as the government promoting big business, okay, actually promoting business interests, whereas the Jeffersonian, Jacksonian way was to just stay out of the way. And so during the Gilded Age, while there's this kind of conception that the government was laissez-faire or something, the government was really anything but. The government is doing lots to try to, you know, to help business, a lot of times at the expense of labor. Keep in mind that there's a lot of labor violence. There are 4 things that you need to know as far as labor violence. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877, the Haymarket Affair. I'm about to have a Rick Perry moment. I'm scared I'm on the spot. The Haymarket Affair, the Pullman Strike, and the Homestead Strike. Okay, so those are 4. Great Railroad Strike, the Homestead, and then Pullman and Haymarket. Okay, so those 4, those will be the only 4 that you need to know. And typically the government is getting involved on the side of the unions, or I mean, not whoa, sorry about that, getting in on the side of big business at the expense of the unions. And also the government passes the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is a weak act. Imagine a 90-pound weakling. And you know, Keith's been talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Clayton Antitrust Act, passed during the Progressive Era, was actually a much stronger piece of legislation. This Clayton Act, think Schwarzenegger. Now, while you're thinking about John Marshall, look up Supreme Court cartoons, Marbury v. Madison. It's this extra normal video, and it's got like John Marshall explaining Marbury v. Madison. There's a little profanity here and there, but it kind of makes it funny. And then there's also a rap. If you put in Supreme Court cartoons, John Marshall rap, I mean, these people made about 20 videos and then they quit. So I'd very much, if you want to know the Marshall Court, look at those videos. Keith, you ever seen them?
No, I'll check them out.
Supreme Court cartoons. You got to look this up. But anyway, so going into the Gilded Age, you know, you've got the government constantly siding with big business. There's this cartoon called Bosses of the Senate, and that's the one where it's got like, you know, these big like trusts. I think Keith's going to look that up so he can display that. Yeah, and they're behind the senators, and then it shows in the corner like the people's entrance is closed. So the people really feel disconnected with their government. You know, but labor, although they're organizing, they're not able to really create a political force in the late 19th century because the public perception is that they're infiltrated by a bunch of communists and anarchists and people like that. And while that was certainly true to a certain extent, it certainly didn't, you know, stand for the whole labor movement. The turning point for the labor movement is the American Federation of Labor, the AFL, led by Samuel Gompers. And Samuel Gompers was all about what they call bread and butter unionism. There's that cartoon I was talking about. That's shown up on test before. It's shown up on Keith's New York's Regents exam, I know, because they actually release their state test in his state, unlike our state, which keeps it a secret every year. So you see those trusts, okay, these big businessmen who were dominating the Senate. So the government is intervening, is picking winners and losers, and the winner tends to be the rich guy. So one thing to note about Teddy Roosevelt going into the 20th century, let's go ahead and make a beachhead in the 20th century, is that Teddy Roosevelt offers Americans a square deal, such as, you know, meaning that he's not going to get on anybody's side. When there's an anthracite coal strike, the coal workers go on strike, and Teddy Roosevelt's like, hey, why don't y'all come to the White House and talk? And the coal workers are like, oh, really? I get to go to the White House? Oh, boy, oh, boy. And then the big business leaders are like, you know, hey, we don't, you know, we want you to just put this down like other presidents have. We paid you money to get, you know, to get the guy elected that you were vice president for that got shot, McKinley. But, you know, Teddy Roosevelt's like, look, if you're not going to show up, you know, you're going to be sorry. And so for the first time, labor leaders and business leaders go to the White House and they actually talk. Teddy Roosevelt was also the first American president to negotiate a peace between, people that were at war. The Russo-Japanese War was, the treaty was signed in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So the United States, Teddy Roosevelt symbolizes not only domestically that the government is going to be more of an umpire. Like Teddy Roosevelt's got this reputation as a trust buster, but he wasn't anti-business. He didn't go after all the trust. He just went after the most flagrant ones, and that's really he's got this really consistent philosophy, because foreign policy or domestic policy, as long as you're behaving yourself, Teddy Roosevelt doesn't have a problem with you, but you start misbehaving and you've got a problem. So that's a few things there. I'm going to see what direction Keith wants to go with this, or if he's got anything to add.
I would just highlight the concept of what Mr. Richey was talking about. I always teach my kids that really the biggest word for Roosevelt, for the Sherman Antitrust Act, for the progressive movement is competition. It's almost like a magic word, like representation. Competition is like the WD-40 of capitalism. If you have competition, things run much more smoothly. The problem is, whether it's because of government subsidies or extreme wealth or social Darwinism or whatever you want to call it, that you have a humongous kind of buildup of wealth and a social class system problem. You have a lot of poor people, a lot of poor people, and very few rich people that are monopolizing and creating trust in big business. So I have a hammer. I'm not going to sing I have a hammer, although I have a lovely singing voice. But the concept is that the Clayton Antitrust Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, are supposed to, in a sense, take like a monopoly. I'm not going to hit Noam Chomsky.
Okay, that's my daddy.
And break him up in order to take this monopoly. And if I broke them up into little Noam Chomskys, what could they do against each other? They could compete. And I think that's the big idea. And Mr. Richey is right when he said that, it's kind of a misnomer to talk about like a complete laissez-faire government, whether you're talking about, Cleveland or Lincoln or all those guys who are Republicans. They are interfering in the economy, but they're interfering really not through regulation, which is a progressive idea, right? Teddy's going to regulate the environment, the conservation kind of stuff, or Teddy Roosevelt's going to regulate consumer goods like food, the FDA, and the Pure Food and Drug Act, and stuff like that. But really, in a sense, I like to keep my hands up, because it reminds me of that idea of industrialization and the Gilded Age, that the government isn't solving problems, but they are interfering. There's no the invisible hand of the government's there. So whether it's by contracts or by land giveaways for the railroad, or whether it's I think I read somewhere that was Andrew Carnegie or J.P. Morgan, one of those guys, that made like their first million buying broken weapons and selling them back to the government in the Civil War. So there's a lot of crooked business going on. But in a very general sense, I keep my hands up in terms of economic laissez-faire, or not a regulation. So when Mr. Richey mentioned before the union movement and the government being side of the big business, their hands are up. Because the unions are going, recognize us, do something, help us. The government's going, no, capitalism should run unfettered. And that's when the government is allowing, in a sense, for the monopolization and for the unfair treatment of workers and yada, yada, yada. But really what we want to get to is we move into World War I now. We're getting there. World War II and Cold War, bang, bang, we'll be in Iraq. The idea is that the progressive era is regulation. Now, let's talk about foreign policy. I'm going to do a dance for you, and then we'll see where we are.
Now, real quick, Keith, let me go into Twitter real quick. Matt _Goose, has asked us, I just want to clarify something for the Hangout as far as unions. He is right that the Sherman Antitrust Act was not really effectively used against business, but it was effectively used against labor unions.
Against unions, that's right.
And so the Clayton Antitrust Act specifically exempted labor unions from the antitrust legislation, which, of course, has had the side effect of producing these unions that have like millions of members. I mean, we've got unions that are as big as any corporation.
Yeah, but we're not going to get political, Tom, but the union movement in the last 20 or 30 years has nosedived.
Oh yeah, correct. But now it did contribute to, as far as like, union power and that.
Oh right, like in the 1950s. Right, in the 1950s when we had a huge, humongous upper middle class growing and all that stuff. I get that. Yeah.
But yeah, so the Clayton Act, specifically, like, unions are not subjected to antitrust legislation.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Right, good. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna do the dance, and we'll go back to Richey for some cool stuff. That's really, again, kind of like social, cultural, big stuff, especially ideas for like women and minorities in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. But I'm gonna do something kind of special for you guys now. I call it the foreign policy dance. And one of the ideas, if you can get like a chronological order, you can get like an idea of like when things happen, you can really predict a lot on the exam. So if I can play a little bit music. I'm about to get down. I'm about to get all funky and stuff. You ready for this? This is exciting. You hear that? How hip is that? How hip is that? So this is called the foreign policy dance. And the idea is, first of all, who do I dance for? I'm not dancing for you suckers. I'm dancing for me. And really, if you're ever writing about foreign policy, get that idea across first. I'm going to turn the music off for a second. The biggest idea is that we do things for our own self-interest. You know, thesis, theme, big ideas are like umbrellas. They start in the opening paragraph, and then whenever we can, we point up, and we look up at that theme, and we kind of go back to it. So I'm dancing for me. You ready, guys? We're going to do 8 or 9 foreign policies from the beginning of American history all the way through current. Here we go. I start by doing the dance like this. I'm doing isolationism, guys. I'm drawing a circle around me. You can't see my feet, but I'm drawing a circle around me, and I'm saying, stay the hell away from Europe. This is Washington's farewell address, and the idea that early on in American history we're isolated because we're like a 98-pound weakling in a world of bullies. And Washington's basically saying, if you mess around with Europe, you gonna get us, sucker. So I start by doing this, and actually I do that dance for a very long time. I mean, we have the War of 1812, but we don't step foot in Europe, guys. We stay the hell away from the gym room, and we really build ourselves up until right around Civil War time. You know, what happens to teenagers when they hit puberty? They grow really fast. What happens when teenagers, you know, grow really fast? They get really hungry. So what is the next part of the dance? I'm going to rub my belly. This is imperialism. Imperialism beginning in around 1880s, 1890s. We're going to fill our belly, guys. We're going to fill our bellies by going, what, Spanish-American War, and we have the Philippines and Hawaii, Panama Canal. I'm doing that to fill my belly with raw materials and new markets. So that's the dance. I start doing that. As World War I breaks out, I'm going to change. What happens when war breaks out? We go back to Washington's words. What are Washington's words? Stay the hell away. So we go back to the funky isolationism. Sometimes I'll do it like a turtle. I'm hiding from the war. I'm in the turtle, baby, and this would be right around, what, 1912, 1914, 1915 as World War I is breaking out. Now I'm going to knock on my head. You ready? Because there's only one way to get the turtle out, and that would be to anger the turtle. I'm talking about the Zimmerman Note. I'm talking about the sinking of the Lusitania in unrestricted submarine warfare. I'm talking about Russia leaving the war. I'm talking about enough to make the turtle do what? World War I, baby. What am I doing? I'm going to go win the war, baby, because that's what America does, because it's in our self-interest, expanding democracy, making sure Europe doesn't fall to shambles. But after World War I, what happens? Right? Treaty of Versailles, baby. The Treaty of Versailles, signed by Woodrow Wilson, 14 points. He gets the League of Nations. He brings it back to the Senate, and the Senate goes, what you talking about? What you talking about, sucker? Thumbs down, baby. And then what do you do in the dance? You go back to the turtle, baby. I'm talking about the 1920s, the 1930s. America's neutral as World War II breaks out. Remember, appeasement's going on over there, and we're in the turtle. And then what happens? Eventually, the turtle peek out, and it sees the Nazis are winning. So I'm going to come out of the turtle, and what am I doing? This is the Lend and Lease Act, guys. I'm throwing supplies to Europe. I'm making sure that I save Great Britain. I save the Allied forces. But I'm still in the turtle. And then what happens right around 1941? I got to keep playing the song. I can't dance to no music. That's ridiculous. 1941? You see what I did? That's Pearl Harbor. I'm going to come out and I'm going to fight. Now, after World War II, I'm never going to go back to the turtle again. America's out now because it's in our self-interest to be a major world player. We just used the atomic bomb. We're a superpower, and now we're going to get into the Cold War, and the dance changes. You ready for the next part of the dance? After I do this, you know what that is? That's containment, baby. I'm pushing away communism. The Reds are coming. And whether I'm going to the Cuban Missile Crisis, trying to get rid of Castro, Berlin Airlift, Momo, Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, Korea, Vietnam, I'm doing that. Now, I'm going to end this. But really, the last foreign policy after the Cold War is called the New World Order. Sometimes I'll do like a nice cop move. I'll smile and do this. Because the idea is that really the United States is protecting our self-interest by really aiding other countries. Kuwait, the Persian Gulf War, Serbia and Bosnia, trying to go to Somalia. We're being a world player, but really there's other self-interest going on. I think 9/11 changes the dance. So if you practice the dance, and you can check it out, there's a foreign policy dance video, you do isolationism, then you rub your belly, then you do the turtle, knock, 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 World War I. What happens after World War I? Rejection of Treaty of Versailles. Back to the turtle, Lend-Lease, Pearl Harbor, containment, New World Order. What do you want to say about foreign policy, Mr. Richey? Why don't you take it for 5 or 10 minutes?
All right, foreign policy. Now let me check Twitter here and see if anything's going on. Now there are a few things you might want to note about basically the the turtle. One thing I want to note is the 1920s and 1930s. We're kind of going back into our shell, but it still is very important to keep in mind that the United States is not just totally withdrawing. Now, if we're thinking about like a push or something.
The Washington-Briand Treaty, is that what it's called?
Yeah. So you've got the Washington Naval Conference. Now, the other thing is keep in mind that in the Senate, when Woodrow Wilson brought the Treaty of Versailles back, it was really more Woodrow Wilson's refusal to compromise, because there were three groups. There were the internationalist Democrats, then there were the irreconcilables. There were about 20 people in the Senate that were like, we don't like the idea of a League of Nations. But then there were the reservationists who just said, hey, we've got some doubts and we would like to make some modifications. Henry Cabot Lodge came up with 14 reservations, which you can see what he's trying to do there. It's just he's really trying to get at Wilson. But keep in mind, you've got two different schools of thought here. Wilson has a more idealistic foreign policy, whereas, there was more internationalist, that we should have world peace and all that, whereas Teddy Roosevelt also had an interventionist foreign policy, but it was based on the projection of American power. And so really you see this in a lot of presidents since then. I think, Wilsonian foreign policy, you see that with John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy has a very ideological foreign policy, very tough talk against communism. One of my favorite speeches is JFK's Each Be Nine Berliner speech. I've got that on my iPod. Sometimes on the drive home, I'm thinking about some Mastodon. I'm like, hey, JFK's Each Be Nine Berliner speech, and I'll just listen to that on the way home. I mean, it's just like, let them come to Berlin, then finally, Each Be Nine, or no, I'm sorry, wait, Doch Sie Berlin. So whatever, German kind of stuff. But anyway, John F. Kennedy's talking real tough, and then you've got the Cuban Missile Crisis, which it's like, whoa, we went to the brink, okay? Is about going right up to the line and saying, like, look, we're going to see who's going to step off. Think of like the Dr. Seuss book, the Zacks, the North going Zacks and the South going Zacks. I always read that about this time. So people are like, whoa, that was quite a bit of scare there, and then you see, which is, known as realpolitik, where his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, was inspired by Bismarck. And let's not have an ideological foreign policy, even though Nixon had a record as somebody who was really tough on communism as a congressman, senator. He'd been on the House Un-American Activities Committee, he'd been Eisenhower's vice president. But Nixon is going to engage in a policy of detente with the communist world, where he's going to go to China. He's going to open up, relations there, whereas the Kennedy administration and others had ignored the communist Chinese government. Why does Nixon go over there? It projects American power. Okay, this is realpolitik. This is kind of, where we go over there because it would benefit us. Also note that there was a divide in the communist world. Don't look at the communist world as being monolithic. look at the communist world as, you know, China and Russia are both great powers, and the Russians, you know, want to dominate the Chinese. The Chinese are like, no, you know, we're like the biggest country in the world. Like, you know, we're not going to be dominated. So there, you know, there are some different differing views between them. So Nixon's thinking, I'll go exploit that rift. So I'll go to China. I'll cozy up to the Soviet Union. We're working on like SALT, these strategic arms limitation treaties. So those are all some things to kind of keep in mind. Now, the policy of containment, also you need to keep in, like, you know, we are trying to contain communism. We're trying to push it away. Now, we're not trying to roll it back until Reagan. Reagan wants to roll back communism. But one thing to note is that you have containment in various parts of the world. So there's containment in Europe, which we're using the Marshall Plan in order to give money to Western European governments so that they don't turn communist. There's even the government in Yugoslavia that we give them some Marshall Plan money, even though they're communist, but they're not aligned with the Soviet Union. So we're like, hey, here's some money so you don't align with the Soviet Union. Then in Southeast Asia, we're trying to contain communism. It's less successful there. That's where the Vietnam War happens, and you end up seeing communism in not only Vietnam, but Laos and Cambodia. This is based on the domino theory, that, you know, if Vietnam falls, everything falls. Well, a few countries fell, but then again, Thailand never became communist or anything like that. So keep in mind that you've got this foreign policy. Now, also, you know, Carter is very Wilsonian. Jimmy Carter is all about trying to promote peace in the world and all that stuff. He's still rambling on about all that. You know, Reagan is, you know, very idealistic as well. You know, Reagan really talks up a lot of things, you know, which I've got one of my buddies here on Twitter, Mike, wanted me to talk about Reagan just a little bit.
Oh, God,
Reagan
Mike Sullivan. It's Mike Sullivan.
Wait, you know this guy?
I know Mike Sullivan.
Okay, well, yeah, Mike Sullivan. Now, you know, I would recommend for Reagan, look at the Evil Empire speech, which really not only shows his, you know, rhetoric about the Soviet Union, but also how he's able to co-opt evangelicals. Even though Ronald Reagan was not an evangelical Christian, Ronald Reagan's got these people swooning over him. You know, Ronald Reagan's got like astrologers in the White House and stuff.
Ronald, I just love you, Ronald.
All right, so so the thing is that you've got the Evil Empire speech, you've got the Berlin Wall speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Now, another thing that you've got for Reagan is his Time for Choosing speech, which he made in 1964 in support of Barry Goldwater. Now, Barry Goldwater was kind of the godfather of the conservative movement. Think of Barry Goldwater as John the Baptist, who gets his head cut off. And then there is Reagan, who is like the Jesus of the conservative movement, who gets to ascend into heaven and all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, am I onto something here, Keith?
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Okay, yeah. Keith's not quite as familiar with this.
No, I understand the concept. The concept's great. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, the concept. Yeah, but yeah, Keith and I, you know, we've got some friendly rivalries here.
Mr. Richey's to the right of my left.
Okay, there we go. So the cat's out of the bag. But anyway, that's really you know, a feature there of you know, of this sort of thing. So keep in mind that certain presidents are worried about projecting American influence, and other presidents are concerned about ideology. You know, whether that be an ideology of peace or an ideology of freedom or an ideology of democracy, and that's very important to just kind of see the nuances of that.
Yeah, that's some good stuff for you guys who are looking for more recent foreign policy, and especially like Reagan stuff. And I'm going to keep talking a little bit about that in a minute, but I want to throw it to the Supreme Court and some of the cases that might pop up on the exam. Mr. Richey, are you still there?
Oh, yeah,
I just wanted to ask you, I'm very familiar with state exams, but I'm about to launch in the Supreme Court. Should I spend 1 minute on it or 5 minutes on it?
It really depends. Okay, the Supreme Court, you know, let's kind of paint it with a broad brush, and you kind of
let me do that, and then you stop me if I'm going in too much detail.
Okay, let me go ahead and give you like about a 20-30 second thing.
Yeah,
okay, you've got Marshall Court, okay, which is you know, you got the Marshall Court.
Then
you've got Dred Scott. Then you've got the Supreme Court in the late 19th century, which is very strict constructionist conservative.
Right.
Continues through the New Deal, then gets more liberal, you know, then gets more conservative again.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay, there's not a lot of time left, guys, and I know I'm going to go, you know, maybe till 10:15, 10:30. Richey, you just tell me when you're done. I'll keep going. But I break up my Supreme Court cases into like 3 bags. And there's a Supreme Court video. It's way too long to watch right now. It's literally like 25 minutes. But it's called Supreme Courts for Dummies. But the idea is you either have cases that, oh, I got to switch me. These kids taught me a lesson. There we go. How you doing? So the idea is, number one, you have cases that do this. You have cases that do this. You have cases that do this. So if you could just categorize the cases, you can really bang some multiple choice. So number one, your cases that do this go back to Schwarzenegger. Remember I called John Schwarzenegger Marshall? Because they're strengthening cases to the federal government. The big ones, just note 2. McCulloch versus Maryland. This is a case that's really testing whether or not the national bank is a constitutional entity. The Constitution doesn't say national bank, but it gives the delegated power to coin money, value currency, create debt. So what Hamilton, as Secretary of Treasury, convinces Washington that the elastic clause is implied powers. It allows us to create the national bank in order to exercise those delegated powers. The elastic clause doesn't say Congress can make any law it wants. It says that Congress may make a law that's necessary and proper for executing its delegated powers. So the national bank pops up, but when the national bank goes to Maryland, Maryland's like, no, you didn't. We don't like you here. So they tax the national bank. Go back to that federalism idea, and remember that this is, in a sense, Maryland telling the National Federal Bank, yo, I'm going to tax you. Dad, I'm taxing you. I'm charging you $100 to let me live here. What are you talking about? And that's what Marshall says. He says, number one, who's your daddy, kid? That's the supremacy clause. That if it comes to this battle between states and feds, if it's a constitutional rationale there, the feds are going to win. Of course, if the feds pass a law that say you have to burn your underwear in the town square, that's a different story. But they also say that the elastic clause, that's Congress's job to interpret. Like, as long as it's not cray-cray, again, the town underwear burning, let's leave Congress to the ability to interpret the elastic clause. Gibbons versus Ogden does the same concept for interstate commerce. But Mr. Richey is right in terms of those strict constitutional cases. Strict constitutionalism is, in a sense, if we go back to that Great Awakening idea that Mr. Richey brought up before, that idea that you had like old-time religion, where people are like reading Bible passages, and it's very conservative, and the word is the word is the word is the word. If it says you're going to hell, you're going to hell. And then that's strict interpretationalist. They read the Constitution like that. If it ain't in there, it ain't in there. Dred Scott, you're not a citizen. It ain't in the Constitution. Black people aren't citizens. Slaves aren't citizens. End of story. Or they're looking at some of these cases that are trying to extend work days, or it's labor versus big business. They're siding on big business because they're not finding the constitutional language to give the people, the progressives, what they want. So these are limiting cases. There's also limiting cases that limit your rights. You have Korematsu versus United States. And that might be a little bit racist, I hope not, but I'm trying to get you to remember the idea that Korematsu is a Japanese. But you know what his first name is? You know what his first name is? Fred. He's a Japanese American. He's about as Japanese as I'm Japanese. He just happened to have Japanese blood. So in that court case, FDR suspended his habeas corpus. He said, Fred Korematsu, I know you didn't do anything wrong, but get into the internment camp. But Mr. President, do nothing wrong. And the court upheld that. The court said that because it's wartime, we can do that. Schenck versus United States. Free speech is not absolute. Schenck is like, burn your car, don't go to war, you're under arrest. Free speech. No, it's not free speech because you're causing a panic, a clear and present danger. If you yell fire in a movie theater, that's not free speech, that's dumb. Of course, there's an argument that Charles Schenck wasn't yelling fire in a movie theater, yada, yada, yada. But to the big expansion cases, these are your Warren Court cases. This is the new religious pastor that's going to read beyond the words to the spirit of the Bible, the Constitution, rather than what it says word by word. So, for instance, is there anywhere in the Constitution that says you have a right to an attorney if you can't afford one? The state's going to get you one. No! But in Gideon versus Wainwright, the court takes the Fifth Amendment using the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment isn't just for African Americans with an equal protection clause. The 14th Amendment says quite clearly no state shall deny its citizens equal protection under the law or deny them life, liberty, or property without due process. Bang, bang, where's due process clause? It's in the Fifth Amendment. It's in the Fifth Amendment. So in a sense, what the court's doing, it's using the 14th. You ever play the crane game? You put a quarter in, and you go, right? The 14th Amendment's like that crane. And what the court's doing is it's using that 14th Amendment to incorporate some of those amendments like the 6th Amendment right to an attorney. In Gideon versus Wainwright, when they say, look, if you're not giving someone a lawyer because they're poor and they can't afford one, in a sense what you're doing is you're denying them due process that other people that can afford lawyers have. So even though the words aren't in there, what am I doing to the words? What am I doing to the court's power? What am I doing to the nation's rights for people that don't have those rights back then? I'm expanding them. All of those court cases are like that. Mapp versus Ohio. You know what happens if the cops don't go in a house without a warrant? They find like the bloody knife. They can't use the bloody knife. Why? Because in Mapp versus Ohio, they said that Mrs. Mapp's due process was being denied because the warrant wasn't being shown. So those are your warrant court cases. You have Roe versus Wade, and there's a whole bunch. Miranda versus Arizona. There's Engel versus Vitale. But you can watch that video. But the big idea is you either go bam, 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 and then you generally have the idea. The new court, I would say Rehnquist court, is back to a strict interpretation in the 1980s. But right now we have a 5-4 court. It's really a 4-4-1 court, and it really is a swing court. So depending on the issue, sometimes they're a little bit more activist. Activist is loose interpretation. Sometimes they're a little bit, like maybe in the recent McCutcheon decision, a little more strict interpretation. But either way, this isn't about opinion. This isn't about ideology. This isn't about the left or the right. This is about you, bang, bang, in the AP exam. Mr. Richey, are you gone? It's just me. I'm all alone. I feel so lonely. I'm going to invite him because he didn't say goodbye, so I got a feeling that we lost him. But I'm going to keep going for you guys as much as I can before I fall down and I wiggle like a little boy on the ground and someone has to wake me up. So I invited him there. My problem, guys, is I'm out of Monsters. So I just got a little bit of water. I'm going to sip my water. You know, we didn't talk about Great Depression. Let's just talk about a couple thesis ideas, okay? One thesis idea. Remember thesis, man. Thesis is this big idea, this umbrella that hangs over the essay. And if you can go in with some, like, stink don't stink until it's in your backyard, I can use that thesis for a number of things. Like, take civil rights, right? In the 1950s, civil rights is kind of stalled in a sense with Brown versus Board of Ed. The courts made this huge decision, but in a sense, society hasn't gotten there yet. So if you take something like Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a young black boy from Chicago. He goes down to visit his relatives down in Mississippi. He breaks Jim Crow custom by whistling at a white woman. That night, the Klan's at his house. They knock on the door. They take the boy, and they mutilate him and murder him. And what happens when they have that trial? And first of all, one thing the mother did, Miss Till, is she made sure there was an open casket at his funeral. And his face, and you don't want to Google it, trust me. And if you do it with the spirit of love and peace and understanding, not in a malicious way. It's disgusting. But why would she have the open casket? Because stink don't stink until it's in your backyard. When that picture's in Life Look magazine, when Jet shows that magazine, and every American sees that face, it's the face of Jim Crow. And you know what? It stinks. And really, that leads into the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement isn't just going to be the Southern Christian Leadership Council. It's not just going to be the Students for Non-Violating Courting Canadian Committee. It's going to be whites from the North, Christians and nuns and Jews and secularists and all kinds of people, because they're being motivated by that stink. Same thing with what? We did Fugitive Slave Act. Stink don't stink until it's in your backyard. But the thesis that I was going for was that crisis breeds big government, crisis breeds limited rights. This is a huge theme, man. If you can write about this theme, bang, bang, you're going to pass. It's great. So take something like the Great Depression. Prior to the Great Depression, the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, the Great Gatsby, kind of all that shindig, right? We really have more of a withdrawn government, a laissez-faire government, because things seem to be working for us. So even though there's still, the Scottsboro Boys, there's race riots, there's Rosewood, there's like death and destruction and cats eating dogs, and really there's huge poverty problems and overcrowded cities, and if you want to look at problems, they're there. It's just that people really aren't aware of them yet, maybe. and we don't have everybody facing a crisis. So what does the Great Depression do? When the Great Depression occurs with the stock market crash in 1929, Herbert Hoover's in power. And look, there's a misnomer. Misnomer is like a misbelief. People say Hoover's completely laissez-faire. That Hoover was like, I don't care about anybody, everyone can go to hell, whatever. That's not the idea. You know, Richey was trying to get in. We're going to invite him one more time. I'm looking at the time. You guys have to go to bed at a reasonable hour here. There's a meditation video. Did you know that? There is, I promise you. Can I screen share and show it to you? That would be great. But watch this. We'll tell the Great Depression crisis story. I promise. You're so excited for it. But if I hit screen share here, bloop, 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 screen share. There we go. Okay. Is it this page? Yeah. All right. So all you have to do is do HipHughes meditation. And then bang, bang. There it is right there. And it's 20 minutes. Put your headphones on. It's not creepy, I promise. I kind of put you to sleep. We don't got to watch the pizza guy. I'll put you to sleep. And when you fall asleep, I'm going to talk about U.S. history. I swear. But I promise I'm not going to be creepy. Okay. Did we invite him already? I think we invited him. I'm going to invite him one more time, and then I'll move on. Because you guys are like, Mr. Hughes, I got to learn and go to bed. That's great. Okay. One more time. He might, like, send me a message. Richey, if you're watching this, if you're done, just, like, send me a text. But we'd love to have you back because you're helping the children do the learning on the YouTube. Okay. So the Great Depression is going to put everybody into the gutter, a large part of the United States. So now that we have 25% unemployment, now that people have lost billions of dollars, now that banks are being shut down, now that we have like homelessness that's rampant, you have to remember that it's not Hoover's fault. There's just no safety net back there. You know, back then, if you lose your job or you're out of work or you get fired, there ain't no food stamps, baby. There ain't no welfare. There ain't no Social Security. There ain't no, there's just churches and food banks and stuff like that. So I think that what that crisis breeds is a want of a bigger government to solve these problems and enter the New Deal. The Great Depression, hey babe, it looks like you got a case of the Great Depression. You want to come up to my room for a New Deal? Do-do-do-do-do. The Great Depression leads to the New Deal, this bigger government, right? So in a sense, look, Hoover's not completely laissez-faire. Hoover did raise taxes. Hoover did pass tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imports that help manufacturers. But it just wasn't the right medicine to solve the problem fast enough. And I think that sometimes it doesn't matter if a president's doing the right thing. If the president's doing something and people don't see results, they blame the president, whether or not it's their fault. So that crisis is going to lead in 1932 to FDR. Now, FDR is walking in, number one, with a united legislature. He's got all Democrats in his back pocket. So he has that executive ability to make big decisions, to do big things. So we get the New Deal. I always see FDR, whether you believe it ideologically or not, as a doctor. The country's got the Great Depression. He's a doctor. He's got a big bag of tricks. And those tricks become the New Deal medicine. And just know a few. An easy one would be like Tennessee Valley Authority. You do that with a little bit of accent CVA, and at least you'll understand the idea that it's about modernizing, the Appalachians in the South. I'm not going to do all the New Deal stuff. That's just cray-cray at this point. But I would get across the idea of this. You know what I'm doing? Do you know what I'm doing? This is court packing, baby. The idea is that the FDR has like two branches of government in his fist. He's got the executive branch and the legislative branch. If FDR is like, yo, Congress, yo, go get me a Pepsi, Congress is like, okay. Here you go, Mr. President. The problem is that he's got this other third branch that's annoying him. What branch haven't I said yet? What branch haven't I said? I haven't said the judicial branch. So as these New Deal programs start being challenged in the court's not going to give FDR everything he wants. And in two cases, in the cases of the Agricultural Adjustment Act and the National Recovery Act, the NRA, there's a great court case called Shetner Poultry versus United States. I have it on my YouTube page. I only did it like a month ago. It's the chicken case. And basically what the NRA did is they were trying to set prices on eggs. And, you go, how could the government set prices on eggs? That's ridiculous. It's a chicken. And FDR would say, he'd go, well, look, the chicken came from Pennsylvania. And then you brought the chicken to Brooklyn, Mr. Schechner. And then the egg came out of the chicken's ass or something. So the egg technically was in Pennsylvania, crossed state lines. So that's interstate commerce, which gives the federal government the right to regulate commerce. And the Supreme Court's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Unconstitutional. Remember, judicial review, the power to rule things unconstitutional, is not in the Constitution. It comes from Marbury versus Madison established judicial review. It's part of the unwritten Constitution. But either way, now we have FDR like this. Son of a beep. I can't believe they beep. Right? He's upset at the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court got in his way. Google court packing cartoons. There's tons of them. Like FDR's like trying to like steer the ship, and the Supreme Court's like, not on my watch. It's that idea that he can't do everything that he wants. So what does he do? He goes to Congress. He says, Congress, I have a great idea. You should pass a law that puts more people on the Supreme Court. You know who picks the people that go on the Supreme Court? Let me think. Me. And who would approve the justices? You. Teamwork. And it's at that point that the public turns against FDR, that even Congress is like, oh, that seems a little fishy, if you know what I mean. And we end up with a rejection of the court packing plan. It's one part of the New Deal that doesn't occur. But again, crisis breeds expansion of government. World War II. What did we get? Korematsu versus United States. Korematsu versus United States. We have the Supreme Court willing to allow the president to detain Americans in desert internment camps who have done nothing wrong. Crisis breeds big government and limited rights. Schenck versus United States, World War I. White Southerners in border states like Kentucky during the Civil War, they were locked up many times not even fighting the government, just for even thinking about being a rebel. Because Lincoln said, I'm not going to wait for them to blow up the government. I'm going to throw them in the hole, and after the war, we'll deal with it. 9/11, Arab Americans. And even if you live in a big city, I tell my kids this all the time. I teach in a big school in the middle of Buffalo, and I'll say to my kids, what happens if there's like a drive-by on the east side? And then the next night, you're like, I'm going to go to the library with my backpack. My kids always get stopped. And the cop will kind of make them think, you got to empty your backpack. And they go, what about my rights, Mr. Hughes? You taught me about, these amendments and all this stuff. And the cop's like, open your bag and get against the wall. And he's patting me down. And I go, it's the same concept. I'm not saying it's right, but there's this limiting of your rights because they're afraid for the safety of the neighborhood. And of course, they don't care. They just want their rights like everybody else. But yada, yada, yada. What else can we talk about? Because I don't think that Richey's coming back, man. And I think that eventually we have to turn ourselves off. But I see we have like 180 people, 200 people. It's going down a little bit. What else can we do for you guys before we got to chalk it up? Because you can go through the playlist when you're done. And number one, if you don't subscribe to Richey and me, I'm going to make sure you fail. I'm going to get to the college board. I'm going to get when they're grading their exams. I'm going to find your IP address. I'm going to find your exam, and you're going to fail. You're not going to pass. You're going to fail. It's going to be terrible. All you got to do is click subscribe. How hard is that? How hard is that? Check it out on Twitter. Go to YouTube, yada, yada, yada. So some big ideas that we can help you with. Definitely during the civil rights movement, you got to write about stuff. You have to have specific episodes of the civil rights movement that are actual people examples. So the big ones that I like to do with my kids, because they're related to court cases and there's executive stuff and governmental stuff go on, is number one, the Little Rock Nine. Little Rock Nine is 1957. Little Rock, Arkansas is the first big kind of high school, public school in the South that's going to integrate. And when those children show up on day one, the state is exercising their 10th Amendment saying, we're not going to integrate. And the governor actually calls in the National Guard, not to protect the children, but to protect the school from the children. These famous scenes with, the Little Rock Nine, and they're standing around, and there's big mobs, and the National Guard's blocking the little black kid from going to school. And eventually, Eisenhower has to call in and nationalize the situation. He sends in stormtroopers, like federal agents, in order to protect those children and to enforce the law. That's executive action at its finest. But really, it was the pressure of remember I said it, stink don't stink until it's in your backyard. What do you think America thought when they turned their TV screens on and they see a little black kid, he's trying to get into school, there's a big guy with a gun. Whose side are they going to be on? And that's the idea behind the whole civil rights movement. Stink, don't stink until it's in your backyard. All of those images of children getting fire hosed and, you know, dogs biting people and getting billy clubbed. The nonviolence movement is built on the idea that it's those images that will show the world what Jim Crow looks like. Nobody knows what Jim Crow looks like until you see it in the mouth of a German Shepherd dog. And then people start awakening to the idea, look, change doesn't start from up there. Change starts from down here. And what happens when people organize and people get angry or people group together, whether it's on the left or the right, I mean, I'm talking about this could be Greenpeace, this could be the Tea Party. It doesn't matter. It's the idea that if you organize and you get upset and you lobby and you ask for change, it's like heat. What does heat do? Heat rises, right? And eventually, if the government stands on us all in the sense that we let them stand on us because there are representation, then eventually that heat's going to hit their feet. And governments generally are slow to change. They keep their hands up. They're static. They're stuck in the moment. They're, you know, slow. But if you can get that fire high enough, what happens? What does the government got to do? The government's got to put its hands down. Then you get legislative action. So you have to have Little Rock first. You have to have the sit-ins, right? Greensboro, the South Carolina, the lunch counters, African Americans sitting there just waiting to be served. And eventually, when the Klan or the White Citizens Council comes in, and we get those camera shots of people getting billy clubbed and dragged out of there and arrested and these blacks thrown in jail for peacefully exercising, the country's going to side with them. The Freedom Rides by CORE and SNCC in the 1960s, the buses being burned, the Selma marches, the March on Washington, all of that stuff is the heat, baby. And what does heat eventually do? It gets us the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You want a law? 1964 Civil Rights Act, say it a million times. Using the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Clause, we're going to desegregate hotels and institutions open to the public because the 14th Amendment and because of that fire and because of the desire of change by many Americans that have been awakened to the evils of Jim Crow. So definitely get that civil rights idea. I wish Richey was here because I'm getting tired, guys. Oh, there's so much more that we can do. There really, really is. Get big presidents in your head. I do presidents that are laissez-faire, hands up, like a Reagan. Reagan would say, let the states solve the problem, right? There's a great word, I don't know if it's on the exam or not, it's called devolution. All throughout the course, we see really kind of the growth of the federal government. We see that through crisis, whether it's the gap between the rich and the poor in the Progressive Era, whether it's the Great Depression, the New Deal, whether it's through the Great Society in the 1960s. But really, Reagan and Nixon, to a certain degree, are going to try to shrink the role of the federal government. And they're going to do that through, in the 1980s and the 1990s, trying to shrink the budget, trying to shrink spending, trying to shrink the deficit. And some people will argue that Reagan, though, spent lots of money on defense in order to battle the Cold War, which actually blew a hole in the budget as he was cutting social services and things like that. There's a lot of political debate that goes into these conversations. You don't want to get too far into the weeds with that stuff. You really want to stick to big ideas. Definitely have some kind of New World Order kind of stuff. I'd want to have my kids write about the Persian Gulf War in 1991, America's actions in the late 90s in Serbia and Bosnia, really kind of acting almost like a policeman of the world, like really trying to be everywhere and everything to everybody, but at the same time not being able to do that either. We have like the Rwanda genocide in the 1990s that we don't act on. The United Nations doesn't act on. But again, you don't want to get too far in the weeds with those types of things. It's 10 o'clock. I'm done. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, go to the playlist. There's 3-minute videos all over that playlist. I have 145 videos. If you want to stay up another hour or two and watch videos, there's plenty in there to pick from. And go to Richey, too. Just type in Tom Richey. I put the link in the comments there. It's Richey for America, Tom for America. But just type in Tom Richey. He's on the side of my page. Go to HipHughes. Look on the side. Tom Richey's right there. Go look at his. He's got more kind of AP-centered kind of stuff. I have a lot of general idea videos that you need to watch. So check it out. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Thanks for watching, guys. I'm sure we could do so much more, but I think that we just have to shut it down at this point. I have a really great time teaching. I enjoy doing this. I hope that we helped you on the exam a little bit. And like I said, it's really, you know, something we enjoy doing, but we really do enjoy when you interact with us, when you subscribe to us, when you share our sites and tell your friends. We're not doing this to make $1 million. We're doing this because we think we can help kids understand ideas so you can do something with those ideas. You know, if you're a teacher watching this, we're not, you know, trying to replace teachers. We're trying to give you more time so with your kids you can do things like build stuff and like have kids create meaning rather than just talk to them all the time. So we know telling's not teaching, but understanding concepts and basic ideas is something that everybody needs in order to play the video game of life. Where your attention goes, your energy flows, guys. That's something that I believe with all my heart, and I believe that people are more good than they are bad. So I believe in the goodness of you. I'm the wind beneath your stupid wings. See you next time on the YouTubes, guys. I'm out. See ya. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. I'm another monster.